How many of you spend time reading with your learners? And how many of you are having the child read to you and they're practicing their reading? That's a really important skill, and as tutors, that's probably one of the most valuable things that you can do to work with that child. And so if you're working with a struggling reader, you're going to find that they're going to get stuck with words, right? They're going to be stuck, and then your impulse is to say, sound it out, right? Because that's what we were told, that's what our teachers told us. It's okay. That's actually a good strategy. So when you're saying to a child, sound it out, what are you really asking them to do, right? And that's kind of like, let's break it down because it sounds, I mean, we just say it, but it's actually a pretty complex skill, especially when you're working with younger learners. So if we have this word, right, we all recognize that word, but if you were a child, what you're asking that child to do is to look at this letter and identify it, right? That's the letter S. And now they got to think of, okay, the letter S makes the sound. Okay, now this is N. N makes the N sound. This is A. It makes the A sound. It could make the A sound. I'm not sure, but one of those. This is P. It makes the P sound. And now I have to remember all those sounds that I just figured out and blend them together, right? And then to be able to say the word snap. That's actually a pretty difficult task to ask a child to do, and you're actually working with a lot of different skills there. Like, do you recognize the letter? Do you know the sound? Can you keep it in your short-term memory? Can you blend those things? I mean, it's a pretty hard skill. So when you say sound it out, like, that's pretty hard. Now, here's what happens with some other words. Like, okay, snap, again, you have one-to-one correspondence because you have a short vowel. But if we do, it's not always going to work out for you, right? Here's a word. The word is face. It's not an irregular word. It follows all the rules of phonics, right? This is a magic E telling the A to say its name. The C has an S sound because the rule for C's is that if the vowel after this, the rule is the vowel after the C, right? If it's an A, an O, or a U, the C is going to have the k sound, right? So cat, caught, cut, right? But if it's an E or an I, the C is going to have the S sound, like center, city, right? So this is an E, it's going to have the S sound. So this is a totally regular word, and yet if you want a child to sound it out, that's a lot of stuff for them to remember, right? And then let me tell you when sound it out never works. When you have totally irregular words, right? You can try to sound this word out until you're blue in the face. You're never going to get it because this is just one of those words that if you say it out loud and you think about it, how should it be spelled? O-S-H, shun, U-N, right? And yet here we are. How we got there, who knows? But so when you're saying sound it out, be thoughtful about what words you're saying it to and whether you actually can sound it out, because some words you actually can't. Basically, prompting is just a fancy word. Prompting is just basically what a teacher would say to a child to help them figure out the word, right? So it's all the comments and the questions and the probing that a teacher would do. And the rule is, which just sounds kind of mean, I know, but this is what you want to actually do. You want to be as least helpful as possible in your prompt, right? And if that doesn't work, then you become more and more and more and more helpful, right? So what our instinct is, because you're all either, it happens with our teachers, it happens with volunteers, you want to help, right? So the second the child is struggling with a word, my instinct is to be like, oh, let me give you this word, right? Because I don't want to see you struggle. I'm a poor thing. But if you give them that word, then you're not giving them the tools to figure it out, right? So you almost have to be like, oh, I see you're struggling. What are you going to do? Like, wow. And so you want to be very general in your prompting at first. And then when that is unsuccessful, then start guiding them. And then eventually, if nothing else works, then you give them the word, right? But it's operating from general to more specific prompts. So we're going to see some examples of that. So your child is reading, right? Let's pretend that this child recognizes when they're reading, because how many are you working with children that are reading, say things that totally don't make sense at all, make up words even, and keep on reading like nothing ever happened? There's a reason for that. The reason for that is because they're struggling readers, right? And struggling readers have a very high tolerance for things not making sense. So when they read, they're used to things not making sense. So one more thing not making sense for them right now? Just part of a day, right? That's what happens when I read books. Our good readers are the opposite. The second sentence doesn't make sense. Wait, what? And what do usually? They go back, they reread, because we have very low tolerances of things not making sense. So let's pretend that you're working with someone that realized, wait a second, I don't know this word, or this doesn't make sense, or they're stuck and they can't even decode the word, right? The most general thing that you can do and say to that child is, yeah, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to figure that word out, right? You're acknowledging that they're stuck, right? They know that you're aware, right? So you're kind of like leading them to something now, but you're putting the ball in their court. What are they going to try? And for you, it also lets you know what they know. Do you see what I'm saying? So if they're like, well, I'm going to look for a part of the word that I recognize. Okay, that's a great strategy. Give it a try. I'm going to try to sound it out. Good, go for it. Let's see how that works out, right? But if they're like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. That tells you that child doesn't have a lot of those strategies yet, right? Those tools, he doesn't have them. And so you're going to have to provide them for them. Or the teacher has to provide them for them, right? But sometimes you got to push it, because if you've been working with this child for a while and you've been working on chunking, chunk the word, look for something you know, chunk the word. And then you get to the child that, and they're like, what are you going to do? I don't know. Yes, you do. What do we always say? You can try. So you're going to operate from here. What can you do to figure out that word? If the child doesn't notice the error, which is very common with young readers, with struggling readers, what you want to do is first give them a chance to notice the error. Give them a chance to catch it. What we often see, especially, again, I told you that I teach undergraduates, is the second the child makes a mistake, they're already pointing at the word and saying, wait, you said that word wrong. Let's work on this, or let's reread this, right? Have you seen that, or have you done it yourself? Like, what? Don't go forward. And then what happens is you're not even giving them a chance to realize, oh, wait, I made a mistake, right? That's a really important skill for these readers to realize, that doesn't make sense. Wait, I got to do something about that. So you want to give them a few seconds, right? If they don't notice, then you're going to stop them at a place that makes sense. End of the sentence, end of the paragraph, end of the page. Not so long that the error was like 5 minutes ago, but just at a reasonable place. Let them finish the thought, right? And when you're seeing, yeah, they didn't catch that, you're going to say, hold on 1 second. And you're going to ask them, does that make sense, what you just read? And all of a sudden, you're going to make them think. Oh, well, and they're either going to hopefully say, yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. Or they're going to say, no, yeah, that makes sense, right? I mean, so if they're saying to you, that doesn't make sense, then you go back to, yeah, you're right, it doesn't make sense. What are you going to do, right? And you want to encourage them to go back and reread and figure it out. Or you can at least guide them to, let's try rereading this word. What's the issue with this word right here, right? So that's where you point to the word that they're struggling with. Does that make sense? So start with a general prompt if they catch the mistake. If they don't catch the mistake, wait a couple of seconds, see if they catch the mistake. If they don't, ask them to stop and say, does that make sense? And that's a great question to kind of always work with young readers. Does that make sense? Every time they're reading, does that make sense? Are you following along with the story? Do you understand? Now, these are examples of specific prompts that you can try with your young and even intermediate grades, right? It's perfectly fine to start out with, can you sound out the word, right? Give it a try. And these are also not only things that you want to ask to learners, but eventually things that you want the learners to echo back to you when you ask them, what are you going to do to figure out that word? You are hoping that eventually they're going to say, I'm going to try to sound it out, or they're going to look for these things, right? So another very common one that's often taught in schools are there parts of the word that you know, that you recognize? They call it chunking often, right? So there's something that you recognize of that word. Another one, especially when kids are reading picture books and they're younger, can the pictures help you, right? Is there something in the pictures that can help you figure out that word? And then the other thing that you can do is you can listen to what they're saying for that word and point to the part where they're struggling. So like, let's say the word is happy, right? And they're saying to you, happy, the happy. You would point to that A, right, the part that they're getting wrong, and you'd say something like, well, what letter is that? What sound does that letter make? Okay, try saying the word with that sound instead. So it's a little bit more of a guided, like pointing to the actual error. Still together? So let me give you an example. So this is an example of a book that maybe a kindergartner or first grader might be reading, right? Notice how I like to eat grapes, and the picture very clearly supports that the boy likes to eat grapes. So in this scenario, the prompt, do the pictures, can the pictures help you, is a very useful one because there's pictures, the pictures support the text. Let's say that the child is stuck with the word grapes, right? Then if I wanted to show chunking, I might say to the part, is there a part of that word that you recognize? And what part do you think they might point out? Apes, right? Now here's the thing where this is where things get tricky. What if they point out rap? Well, let's go with apes for a second, right? So you go with apes, right? And so you create a window with your hands kind of like this, you know, around the text. And you go, good, you got ape, good job. Now what happens when we add the S to it? Right? So that you want them to say apes, right? And I mean, I know maybe not the best example right now. Okay, let's add an R to it. Now what do we get? Rapes. Now let's add the G to it. What do we get? Grapes. What do you think the word is? Grapes. So little by little, you start expanding your window to add more sounds, right? But what if they pointed out rap instead of ape? Right? What do? You can point out, that's good, but look, there's a magic E. Or you can go with it for now, right? Especially if you're the one guiding the window. Okay, so let's go the opposite way then. Rap, let's add the G, grab, and then I would just open my window to all the way, right? Well, and I would maybe indicate that point, well, that's going to say a S sound together. Those letters are going to work together to make a S sound. That's the word graps. Does that make sense to us? Graps? You know, and hopefully they're going to say graps. No, right? Try changing the vowel sound there. See what you get now. Say the long A sound instead. Grapes. Does that make more sense? Great. So you could have said, look at the picture. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense, graps? So there's different ways that you could have kind of gone about that had they not gone with an app instead of an A sound, because they may not know, right? The whole thing is for you, again, to let the child take the lead and for you to just kind of guide them as opposed to be more like, look at this right here. This is apes. Now what do you think? You know what I'm saying? Like, try to let them be the one that's kind of are like trying the solutions. You're going to work with the child. You're going to be prompting them, right? But there's a point where prompting isn't going to work, right? So when do you prompt and when do you just tell them the word? You prompt when you know that the word can be sounded out, or when it looks like words that they've been able to read before, or they're words you've practiced a similar word with that child before. That's a great time to prompt, right? If you look at the word like ocean, and you're never going to sound out the word ocean, just give them the word. Or it's a proper noun, like the name of a character or the name of a place, give them the word. Don't even waste your time trying to prompt them, just give it to them. Or if it's just a word that it's like a 4th grade word, or it's just too hard, that's when you don't waste your time prompting, focus on telling, okay? And just tell them. General rule of thumb, general. You're stuck with a word, right? I'm going to give you 1 or 2, maybe 3 depending on the situation, but 1 or 2 prompts, right? I'm going to say, you're stuck. Oh, what are you going to do, right? The child says, oh, no. I'm going to say, try to look at the picture clues. The child still gets the word wrong. Maybe I might try one more prompt, but if not, I'm going to give you the word and keep going. Something to think about. You're reading with a child. You open to like, not that one page with the grapes because I only have like 3 words in it, but you know, there's maybe 2 lines worth of text, and you find yourself that the child is having a hard time reading 3 words on that page, right? And you're prompting and giving them the word and prompting and giving them the word. What does that tell you? You chose a book that's too hard, right? And at that point, that's not going to work. Within your reading section, you're looking that you're prompting, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 words here or there, you know what I'm saying? It shouldn't be the thing that dominates the entire reading session. It should be something that you do when they get stuck, but they shouldn't be getting stuck that often in that book, unless the book is too hard for them.
For more information on attack strategies, visit tutoring.uncc.edu for resources, including the Tutoring Handbook. This video was developed by the Center for Adolescent Literacies at UNC Charlotte with support from United Way of Central Carolinas.